Alexander Thorne wasn't the kind of man who slept easily. Even at 42, with more money than most people could count in a lifetime, his mind rarely quieted down. It raced with numbers, strategies, deadlines, always something demanding his attention. His penthouse in downtown Los Angeles had floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off the glittering city below, but he rarely looked out them. He was too busy staring at spreadsheets or pacing the marble floors, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Outside the office, he kept the same control. His home, actually a sprawling modern estate tucked into the hills of Beverly Hills, was run like a well-oiled machine. Staff came and went with military precision. The gardener at dawn, the chef by mid-morning, the cleaners in the afternoon. Everyone knew their place. Everyone followed the rules. And if they didn't, they were gone before sunset. Lately, though, things had felt off, not in a dramatic way. Nothing was missing, nothing broken. But Alexander had noticed little inconsistencies. A drawer left slightly ajar in his study. A coffee mug placed on the wrong side of the counter. A faint scent of lavender in the hallway when he only used sandalwood. Small things. But to someone like him, small things added up. He'd already fired 2 housekeepers in the past year. One had been caught sneaking designer sunglasses into her bag. The other had used his private gym without permission and left sweat on the leather bench. Trust to Alexander was a luxury he couldn't afford. People saw his wealth and assumed he was careless. They didn't understand that every dollar he owned had been clawed from the edge of failure, built on sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. He didn't give second chances. Not in business. Not at home. Now there was the new maid. She'd been hired through a discreet agency that specialized in discreet, reliable domestic staff for high-net-worth individuals. Her file was thin. Minimal work history. No social media presence. References from a convent-run shelter in San Diego. She was quiet, they said. Hardworking. Unlikely to cause trouble. And she was. She arrived every weekday at 7 a.m. sharp, dressed in a simple gray uniform, hair pulled back, eyes downcast. She moved through the house like a shadow. Efficient, silent, never lingering. She cleaned his bedroom while he showered, wiped down the kitchen before he came down for breakfast, and vanished by 3 p.m. without a word, unless spoken to. She never asked for time off. Never complained. Never even made eye contact for more than a second. Alexander found her unnerving, not because she did anything wrong. Quite the opposite. She was too perfect, too invisible, and in his experience, perfection was often a mask. One evening, after a brutal board meeting that ended with him snapping at his CFO and canceling 3 upcoming product launches, Alexander came home exhausted, but wired. His head throbbed. His shoulders ached. He poured himself a glass of mineral water, no alcohol. He never drank during the week, and collapsed onto the cream-colored sofa in the living room. The house was quiet. The staff had long since left. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of crickets broke the silence. He should have gone upstairs to bed. But something stopped him. He remembered the lavender scent again. The way his favorite reading lamp had been angled slightly differently yesterday. The fact that his stress ball, a black rubber orb he kept on his desk, had been moved to the side table last week, right when his anxiety had spiked after a failed merger. Coincidence? Maybe, but what if it wasn't? An idea formed, slow and cold like ice spreading across a pond. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. He'd watch. Carefully, he adjusted his position on the sofa, letting his head loll to the side, his breathing slow and even. He closed his eyes, but not all the way. Just enough to appear asleep while leaving a narrow slit through which he could see. Then he waited. The clock ticked. 10 minutes passed, 20. His neck began to stiffen, but he didn't move. He'd sat through 12-hour negotiations without flinching. He could fake sleep for an hour if it meant uncovering the truth. At exactly 7:45 p.m., the soft click of the service entrance door broke the silence. She was here. Alexander didn't react. He kept his chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. Through his half-lidded eyes, he saw her step into the living room. She wore the same gray uniform, her shoes silent on the hardwood floor. Her dark hair was tied back in a neat bun. She carried a caddy of cleaning supplies, spray bottles, microfiber cloths, a small vacuum for crumbs. She moved with the same quiet efficiency he'd come to expect. She dusted the bookshelves, wiped the glass coffee table, straightened the throw pillows. Nothing unusual. Alexander almost felt foolish for suspecting her. Maybe she really was just good at her job. But then she turned toward the sofa. His pulse quickened, but he forced his body to stay limp. She paused just a few feet away. For a long moment, she simply stood there looking at him. Alexander held his breath, not literally, but close. He kept his face slack, his limbs heavy. Then slowly she knelt, not to search his pockets, not to steal his watch, not to take anything at all. Instead, she reached for the cashmere throw blanket draped over the arm of the sofa. With gentle hands, she unfolded it and carefully laid it over his legs, tucking it around his knees like someone might do for a child or an elderly relative. Her touch was so light he barely felt it, but he felt it, a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket. She didn't leave. She stayed kneeling there, her eyes soft, her expression unreadable but not cold. Not calculating. Something else. Then from the pocket of her apron she pulled out a small, worn notebook, brown leather, edges frayed. She opened it, flipped past several pages, and began to write. Her handwriting was neat, looping, almost old-fashioned. Alexander watched, frozen in place, not because he was pretending anymore, but because he was genuinely stunned. After a minute, she closed the notebook and placed it gently on the coffee table, right in front of him. Open. He couldn't read the words from his angle, but he saw the page was filled with short lines, each one centered neatly. You are more than your work. Breathe. Just breathe. It's okay to rest. Someone sees you. His throat tightened. She sat back on her heels, her hands resting on her knees. And then, in the quietest whisper, so soft he almost thought he imagined it, she said, I hope you find peace tonight. You carry so much. There were tears in her eyes. Real ones, not performative, not staged, just there. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, stood up, and gathered her supplies. Before she left, she glanced back at him one last time, not with fear or guilt, but with something that looked like care. Then she was gone. The front door clicked shut. Alexander didn't move for a long time. His mind, usually a storm of plans and problems, went completely still. He sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from his legs. He picked up the notebook. The paper was slightly worn, the ink smudged in places as if it had been handled often. He flipped through earlier pages. More quotes, more gentle reminders. Some were taped to the inside of kitchen cabinets, others tucked into the pages of books on his shelves. One was even slipped into his gym bag last month. Your body is not your enemy. He'd seen them. He'd even read a few, assuming they were leftover notes from a previous cleaner or maybe something his assistant had placed as a joke. He'd never connected them to her, to the quiet woman who cleaned his floors and never spoke unless spoken to. He leaned back against the sofa, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO. He didn't feel powerful or in control, he just felt seen. And that terrified him more than any boardroom betrayal ever had, because being seen meant being vulnerable. And vulnerability was a weakness he'd spent his entire life erasing. But as he sat there in the quiet house, the scent of lavender faint in the air, he couldn't deny the truth. She hadn't been testing him. She hadn't been stealing from him. She'd been trying to help him, without asking for anything in return. No one had done that in a very long time. Not since his father died, leaving behind a failing business and a mountain of debt. Not since his college roommate walked out after Alexander chose a lucrative internship over helping him through a breakup. Not since his last serious relationship ended because, as his partner had said, you don't let anyone in. Not really. He closed the notebook gently, as if it were something fragile. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would talk to her, but not as the CEO. Not as the man who owned the house, the company, the life she cleaned up after. Just as a man who'd been carrying too much, and finally, someone had noticed. He left the notebook on the coffee table, exactly where she'd placed it, and for the first time in months, he went to bed without setting an alarm for 4 a.m. He slept, not because he was tired, but because, for once, he felt safe. The next morning came slowly, like fog rolling in off the ocean. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting golden stripes across the polished floor. He woke not to the buzz of his phone or the sharp chime of a stock alert, but to silence, real deep silence. And for the first time in years, he didn't hate it. He lay in bed a little longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night before in his head, the way she knelt, the softness in her voice, the tears, the notebook. It all felt too tender to be real, like something out of a movie he'd never watch. Too sentimental, too human for his world of contracts and cold logic. But it had happened. N.E.T. felt it. He got up, showered, dressed in a plain white shirt and dark trousers, no tie, no blazer, and went downstairs. The kitchen was spotless as always. A single mug sat on the counter already filled with black coffee, just how he liked it. Steam curled from the rim. He hadn't asked for it. No one was supposed to be here this early. He picked up the mug, warm, freshly poured. His eyes drifted to the hallway leading to the service entrance. The door was slightly ajar. She was still here. He stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to march in, demand answers, reassert control. Who did she think she was, leaving notes in his house, pretending to care? But another part, the smaller, quieter part he usually ignored, whispered, "What if she really does?" He set the mug down and walked toward the back of the house. He found her in the laundry room, folding towels with careful precision. She froze the moment she saw him, her hands tightening around a soft blue towel. Her eyes dropped to the floor immediately, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir. It's fine. I was just finishing up." There was a pause. The hum of the dryer filled the space between them. He cleared his throat. "The coffee. Thank you." She nodded but didn't look up. "I thought you might need it." "You left something in the living room last night," he said carefully. Her shoulders stiffened. "The notebook?" "Yes," she swallowed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I'll take it back." "No," he said a little too fast. Then softer. "Don't take it back." She finally looked at him, just a glance, quick and nervous, like a bird checking for danger before landing. "Why? Because..." I read it, her eyes widened slightly. "All of it?" "Not all, but enough." He took a step closer. "You've been leaving those notes around the house for weeks, haven't you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, "Only when I thought you needed to hear it." He felt something shift inside him, like a door creaking open after years of rust. "Why would you do that?" She hesitated, then set the towel down on the folding table. Her hands trembled a little. "Because..." "I see you," he frowned. "What do you mean?" "You come home late. You eat alone. You sit in the dark sometimes, just staring at the wall. You rub your temples like your head hurts. You never smile unless you're on a call, and even then it doesn't reach your eyes." She paused, then added quietly, "You look tired, not just physically. In your soul." He didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with simple, unflinching observation. "I'm not trying to overstep," she continued quickly, her voice tight with worry. "I know my place. I couldn't watch you carry all that weight and do nothing, so I left little reminders. Stupid, I know. But they helped me once when things were hard. I thought maybe they'd help you too." "When things were hard?" he asked gently. She looked away toward the window. Outside, a gardener was trimming hedges, whistling softly. "Normal life. Simple life. My mom got sick a few years ago," she said after a long silence. "Cancer. We didn't have insurance. I worked 3 jobs just to keep her in treatment. There were nights I sat in the hospital parking lot and cried because I didn't know how I'd pay for groceries the next week. One day, a nurse slipped me a note. Just 2 words. Keep going. That note got me through the week. Then the month. Then the year." She turned back to him, her eyes clear now, steady. "So when I see someone hurting, even if they have everything, I can't just look away. It's not about money. It's about being human." He stood there, stunned. He'd spent his life believing that success meant never showing weakness, that emotion was a liability, that people only helped others when there was something in it for them. But here was someone who gave kindness freely, quietly, without expectation. "I didn't think you'd notice," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "I thought you'd just toss the notes or ignore them. I never imagined you'd stay awake and watch me." He winced. "I wasn't awake at first. I pretended to sleep." I thought you might be taking things. After what happened with the last staff, her expression didn't change to anger or hurt. Just understanding. You've been burned before. Yes. And now you don't trust anyone. Not easily. She nodded slowly. That's fair. But trust isn't just about honesty. It's also about seeing someone for who they really are, not what you assume they are. He looked down at his hands. They were clean, manicured, used to signing million-dollar deals. But right now they felt empty. I owe you an apology, he said. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I watched you like you were a thief, but you were trying to give me something far more valuable than anything in this house. She didn't reply, just picked up another towel and began folding it again. Her movements calm, rhythmic. He stayed in the doorway, watching her for a moment. There was a grace in the way she moved, no rush, no show, just quiet purpose. He realized he'd never really seen her before. Not as a person, just as part of the background like the furniture or the art on the walls. I'd like to read the rest of the notebook, he said finally. She paused, then handed it to him without a word. He took it. The leather was warm from her pocket. Thank you, he said. She nodded. I should finish up. I have another shift across town this afternoon. You work another job? Yes, at a community center. Helping with after-school programs? He blinked. You work here all day, then go do more work? It's not work, she said simply. It's home. He didn't understand, not fully, but he didn't push. Instead, he asked, what's your name? I mean your real name. Not just the maid. She looked surprised. You don't know? He shook his head. The agency listed you as LC. I never asked. She smiled faintly. It's Lena. Lena, he repeated. It felt strange on his tongue, soft, unfamiliar. Thank you, Lena. She gave a small nod, then returned to her folding. But this time she didn't look down. She met his eyes for a full second, just long enough for him to see the quiet strength there. He walked back to the kitchen, notebook in hand. He sat at the table, the morning sun warming his back, and began to read. Page after page, the words were gentle, wise, never preachy. Some were quotes from poets he'd never heard of. Others were her own thoughts written in that careful script. Rest is not laziness. It's repair. You don't have to earn your worth. You already have it. Even the strongest trees bend in the wind. He read until his coffee went cold. Later that day, instead of heading to the office, he called his assistant and canceled all meetings. He stayed home. He walked through the rooms, noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The way the light hit the staircase in the afternoon, the faint sound of birds outside his study window, the smell of lemon cleaner lingering in the hall, and he thought about Lena, not as an employee, not as a problem to solve, but as a person who carried her own burdens while still finding room in her heart to care for a stranger. That evening, he did something he hadn't done in years. He cooked for himself. Just scrambled eggs and toast, but he ate at the dining table, not in front of his laptop, and when he was done, he wrote something on a small piece of paper, his own attempt at a note. Thank you for seeing me. He left it on the coffee table, right where she'd left her notebook. The next morning, he found it gone. In its place was a new note. In her handwriting, now you see yourself too. That's the first step. He smiled, really smiled, and for the first time in a long time it reached his eyes. But as the days passed, something else began to stir in him. Not just gratitude, but guilt. He started noticing things he'd ignored before. The way Lena's shoes were worn at the heel, how she always brought her own lunch in a faded container, how she never took breaks unless the house was completely empty. He dug into her file again, not through the agency this time, but discreetly through a private contact. What he found broke something open inside him. She lived in a small apartment in East Los Angeles, sharing a single bedroom with her mother, who was still in recovery but needed constant care. Lena worked 6 days a week, here from 7 to 3, then at the community center from 4 to 8. She took the bus both ways over an hour each trip. She'd been on a waiting list for subsidized housing for 2 years. And her mother's medical bills. They were still piling up. He sat in his study, staring at the screen, feeling like a fool. He had a garage full of cars he rarely drove. A wine cellar stocked with bottles worth more than most people's annual salary. A closet full of suits he wore once and never again. And this woman, who gave him kindness when he didn't deserve it, was riding the bus for 2 hours a day just to afford her mother's medicine. He wanted to fix it. Immediately. Wire money. Pay off the bills. Buy her a car. But then he remembered what she'd said. I'm not trying to overstep. He realized his instinct, to throw money at the problem, was still about control. Still about him being the hero. But she didn't need a savior. She needed respect, dignity, a chance. So he didn't act right away. Instead, he watched, listened, learned. He noticed how she spoke to the children at the community center when she came by on weekends. He'd started coincidentally visiting the area. She didn't talk down to them. She listened. She remembered their names, their favorite books, their fears. She had a gift not just for cleaning, but for connecting. One afternoon, he sat on a bench outside the center, pretending to read a newspaper while she helped a group of kids build cardboard robots. She laughed, really laughed, and the sound was light, free, nothing like the quiet, careful tone she used around him. That's when it hit him. She didn't just need help, she deserved a platform. His company had a foundation, mostly used for PR photo ops and tax write-offs. But what if it could be real? What if it could actually help people like her? People with heart, with vision, with the will to lift others up? He went home that night with a new plan, not a handout, an opportunity. But he knew he had to ask her the right way. Not as the boss, as a person who finally understood the difference between giving and empowering. And so, the next morning when she arrived, he was waiting, not in his study, not in the formal living room, but in the sunroom, where the light was soft and the air smelled of jasmine. "Lena," he said as she stepped inside. "Can we talk?" She nodded, cautious but not afraid. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about seeing people for who they really are," she waited. "I see you now," he said, "and I think you could do so much more than clean my house." He didn't offer her money. He offered her a role. Leading a new initiative, real, meaningful work, helping kids like the ones at the center get access to education, mentorship, hope. She listened quietly, her eyes searching his face, looking for hidden strings, secret conditions. When he finished, she didn't say yes right away. She asked questions, hard ones, about budget, autonomy, long-term goals. He answered honestly. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't with excitement or gratitude, it was with quiet resolve. "I'll do it," she said, "but only if we do it right. No photo ops, no press, just real help." He nodded. "Agreed," then she added, "and one more thing." "Yes?" "Don't call me the maid anymore," he smiled. "I won't." From that moment on, something shifted in the house, not just in their roles, but in the air itself. It felt lighter, more human. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was carrying the weight alone. The weeks that followed felt like walking on new ground. Soft at first, uncertain but slowly firming beneath his feet. He didn't announce the change to anyone. No press release, no internal memo, just quiet action. He cleared out a small office on the second floor of the estate, once used for storing old tax files, and turned it into a workspace for her. He brought in a second-hand desk from a local shop, a comfortable chair, a lamp with a warm glow. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed charity, just a place where she could sit, plan, and breathe. She started coming in earlier, not to clean, but to work. She still wore her gray uniform at first, out of habit, but he gently suggested she wear whatever felt right. The next day, she arrived in simple jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, lighter, like she could finally stand up straight. They met every morning at 9, not in his study, not across a boardroom table, but at the kitchen island with mugs of tea, hers herbal, his black. They talked about the community center, about the kids who showed up hungry, about the teenagers who'd stopped believing school mattered. She spoke with a calm clarity that surprised him. She didn't rant or dramatize. She just laid out the truth. They don't need pity. They need someone to believe they're worth the effort. He listened, really listened. And for the first time, he understood that leadership wasn't about commanding. It was about creating space for others to lead. He began redirecting funds from his foundation. Real money, not the usual token donations. He hired a small team, a part-time coordinator, a tutor, a counselor, all chosen by her. He didn't interfere. He signed checks, asked questions when needed, but never overruled her. It was her vision, her heart. He was just the bridge. One afternoon, he visited the center during a tutoring session. He stood in the back unnoticed, watching her move between tables, kneeling beside a boy struggling with fractions, laughing with a girl who'd just written her first poem, quietly handing a granola bar to a teen who hadn't eaten lunch. There was no performance in it, no audience, just care given freely. Afterward, as they walked back to his car, he insisted on driving her home now since her bus route had been cut. He asked, "How do you do it? All this without burning out?" She looked out the window at the passing streets, the palm trees swaying in the breeze. "Because I remember what it felt like to be invisible," she said softly. "When you're poor or sick or scared, the world looks right through you. So if I can be the one person who sees someone, even for 5 minutes, it's worth it." He didn't reply right away. He just drove, the silence comfortable between them. But then something shifted. It started small. A package arrived at the estate. Plain brown paper, no return address. Inside was a stack of medical bills, all stamped paid in full. She recognized her mother's name immediately. Her hand shook as she flipped through them. She went straight to his office. He was on a call, but when he saw her face, he ended it mid-sentence. "Did you do this?" she asked, voice tight. He didn't deny it. "Your mother deserves care. You shouldn't have to choose between her health and your sanity." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. Not with anger, but with something sharper. "You don't get to decide that for me. I was trying to help." "Help isn't doing things for people without asking," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's walking beside them. You paid these bills behind my back. That wasn't kindness. That was control." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Because she was right. He'd done it with the best intentions, relief, gratitude, maybe even love in a clumsy, broken way. But he'd still treated her like someone to be fixed, not a partner to be trusted. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. She exhaled, the fight draining out of her. "I know you meant well. But don't make me a charity case. Just see me, all of me, the strong parts and the parts that struggle." He nodded. "I will." But the damage was done. Not between them exactly, but within him. He realized how deeply ingrained his old habits were. Even when he tried to change, his instincts still leaned toward fixing, controlling, solving. He'd spent decades believing that power meant doing things to people, not with them. That night he sat alone in the sunroom, the city lights blinking in the distance. He thought about his father, how he'd worked himself to death trying to save the family business, never asking for help, never showing weakness. How he'd taught his son that vulnerability was failure. Maybe that's why he'd built an empire on walls instead of bridges. The next morning, he didn't wait for her to come to him. He went to the community center early before the kids arrived. She was sweeping the front steps, a scarf wrapped around her neck against the morning chill. He didn't say anything at first, just took the broom from her hands and started sweeping himself. She watched him, surprised. After a minute, she smiled faintly. "You're terrible at that." "I've never swept a floor in my life," he admitted. "Then why start now?" "Because I want to learn how to be useful in the right way." She leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "Useful isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, consistently, humbly." "I'm trying." "I know," she said, "but trying isn't enough if you keep falling back into old patterns." He stopped sweeping, looked at her. "Tell me what to do." She thought for a moment. "Start by asking before you act, always, even if you think you know what's best." "Okay." "And stop treating generosity like a transaction. You give and you expect something back, even if it's just gratitude or loyalty. Real giving doesn't keep score." He nodded slowly. "I didn't realize I was doing that." Most people don't. They stood in silence for a while, the sun rising higher, warming the concrete. Then she said, "My mom's doing better. She's walking again. She wants to meet you." He blinked. "Me?" She says, "You've changed. And she wants to thank you. Not for the bills, but for seeing her daughter as more than a maid." His throat tightened. "I'd be honored." But before that could happen, another challenge arose. A reporter from a business magazine called, asking for a feature on his philanthropy. They'd heard rumors about his sudden involvement with the Eastside Community Center. They wanted photos, quotes, a story about the billionaire who gave back. He said no. They called again. Offered exclusivity. Said it would boost his company's image. He still said no. But then they showed up anyway, parked outside the center with a camera crew. Lena saw them first. She came running into the office, face pale. "They're here. They're going to film the kids." He went outside immediately. The reporter, a young man in a sharp suit, smiled brightly. "Mr. Thorne, we just want to highlight your amazing work." "This isn't a photo op," he said, voice low but firm. "Leave now." "But the public deserves to know, and the kids deserve privacy, not exposure." The reporter hesitated, then tried a different angle. "What if we blur their faces? Just show you handing out books or something?" "No," he didn't raise his voice. Didn't threaten. Just stood there calm and immovable, like a door that wouldn't open. After a few awkward minutes, the crew left. Back inside, Lena was shaking. "They could have posted those kids online," she whispered. "Some of them are in foster care. Some have parents who don't even know where they are. A photo could have put them in danger." He sat down heavily. "I didn't think of that." "You were thinking about your image," she said, not unkindly. "Even when you say you're not." He looked at his hands. "I'm trying to unlearn a lifetime of bad habits." "I know," she said. "But the kids can't afford your learning curve." That stung. But it was true. So he did something he'd never done before. He asked for help. He called a friend who ran a nonprofit focused on ethical storytelling. Together, they drafted a strict media policy for the center. No photos, no names, no interviews without written consent from guardians. He made it official. Posted it on the door. Trained the staff, and he apologized to Lena, to the team, to the kids. Not with words alone. With action. Weeks passed. The center grew. More volunteers came. Local businesses donated supplies. A retired teacher started a reading club. The change was slow, quiet, but real. One evening, as they packed up after a parent workshop, Lena turned to him. "You've changed," she said simply. He shrugged. "You helped me see what was missing." "No," she said. "You chose to see it. That was your choice." He thought about that all the way home. The next day, he invited her to his office, not the one in the estate, but his corporate headquarters downtown. He didn't bring her as staff. He brought her as a guest. He introduced her to his leadership team, not as the maid, or even the program director, but as the person who reminded us why we're here. They were skeptical at first, these polished executives, used to data and dashboards, not stories about kids and hope. But Lena didn't try to impress them. She just told the truth. She talked about Miguel, who'd gone from failing math to tutoring others, about Aisha, who'd written a college essay about her grandmother's recipes, about how small, consistent care could rewrite a life. By the end, even the CFO was nodding. Afterward, one of the vice presidents pulled him aside. "She's incredible. Where'd you find her?" He almost said, "Cleaning my floors," but he didn't. Instead, he said, "She found me." That night, he dreamed of his father, not the tired, angry man he remembered, but a younger version, standing in a sunlit field, smiling. When he woke, he felt a strange peace. He started visiting his mother's grave for the first time in years. Left a single white rose, said nothing. Just stood there, letting the wind carry his silence. Back at the estate, things felt different, warmer. The staff no longer moved like ghosts. They greeted him in the hall. He learned their names, asked about their families. He even started cooking again, simple meals, nothing fancy. Sometimes he'd leave a plate out for Lena if she worked late. One rainy Thursday, she found him in the kitchen, attempting to chop onions. Tears streamed down his face, not from sadness, but from the sting. She laughed, a real, full laugh, and took the knife from him. "Here, like this." She showed him how to hold it, how to slice without crying. Her hands brushed his briefly, and for a moment the world felt still. They cooked together that night. Pasta, garlic bread, a salad. Ate at the table, talking about nothing important. The weather, a funny dog they'd seen, a song on the radio. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even friendship, not exactly. It was something rarer. Two people choosing to be human together. And in that ordinary moment, surrounded by the smell of garlic and rain tapping on the windows, he finally understood what she'd been trying to show him all along. Wealth wasn't in bank accounts or buildings, it was in connection, in being seen, in showing up. Messy, imperfect, and real. He didn't have all the answers. He still made mistakes. But now, when he slipped, he apologized. When he didn't know, he asked. And when he saw someone hurting, he didn't reach for his wallet first. He reached for his heart. And that, he realized, was the truest form of power. The offer came on a Tuesday morning, wrapped in crisp white paper and sealed with the kind of confidence only years of success could buy. He didn't present it like a gift or a favor. He laid it on the kitchen table between them, next to their mugs of tea, as if it were just another item on the day's agenda. "I've been thinking," he said, voice steady but eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. "The work you're doing, it's too important to stay small. I want to bring it under the foundation officially. Full funding, a real team, office space downtown, and I want you to lead it." She didn't touch the paper, just looked at it like it might burn her fingers. "You're offering me a job," she said slowly. "A role, a platform. Whatever you want to call it," she exhaled, long and quiet. "This isn't just about the center anymore, is it?" "No," he admitted. "It's about changing how the whole company shows up in the world. Not just writing checks, but building something real. And I can't do it without you." She finally picked up the proposal, flipped through the pages: salary, benefits, budget, autonomy clause, reporting structure directly to him but with final say on all program decisions. It was generous, respectful, thoughtful, but she didn't smile. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I've watched you," he said. "I've seen how you listen to the kids, how you find solutions that actually work, how you treat every person like they matter, not because of what they can give you, but because they're human. That's the kind of leadership we're missing everywhere." She set the papers down. "And what if I say no? Then I'll keep supporting the center as it is. No pressure, no guilt." She studied his face. The lines around his eyes softer now, the sharp edge in his voice gone. He wasn't the same man who'd once pretended to sleep just to catch her stealing. That man had been afraid. This one was trying to be brave. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. You'll do it?" "I'll do it," she said, "but on one condition." He leaned forward. "Name it. No titles in the field. No director or executive when we're with the kids or families, just us equals. No hierarchy in the work that matters most." He didn't hesitate. "Agreed." She nodded, then added, "And one more thing. Of course, you don't get to call it your project anymore. It's ours. Or better yet, it belongs to the community. We're just stewards," he smiled, a real one, warm and quiet. "Deal!" The transition wasn't smooth. Nothing worth doing ever is. The first week in the new office downtown felt strange. Glass walls, sleek furniture, a view of the city skyline. Too clean, too quiet. She missed the hum of the old center, the laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of crayons and peanut butter sandwiches, the way the floor creaked near the art room. She brought in a few things from the old place, a handmade quilt from one of the kids, a potted plant that had survived 3 winters, a framed photo of the first group of students who'd graduated high school thanks to their tutoring program. Slowly, the space began to feel like hers, but not everyone welcomed the change. At the first all-staff meeting of the foundation, a senior advisor, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a voice like polished stone, leaned back in his chair and said, "So you're the new face of our outreach? Interesting. And what's your background in nonprofit management?" She didn't flinch. "I've managed crisis, hunger, grief, and hope. That's the only background that matters where I come from." A few people shifted uncomfortably. He raised an eyebrow. "We work with data, metrics, 5-year plans, not just feelings. Feelings keep kids in school," she said calmly. "Data tells you what's happening, but only people tell you why. And if you don't understand the why, your plans are just guesses in fancy folders." The room went quiet. Later, in the hallway, the man stopped her. "You've got fire," he said, not unkindly. "But fire without structure burns everything down." "I'm not here to burn," she replied. "I'm here to warm." He nodded slowly. "We'll see." She didn't try to win him over with charm or deference. She invited him to visit the center, not for a tour, to sit with the kids, to listen. He came the next week, sat in the back of a reading circle, watched a 10-year-old teach his little sister how to tie her shoes, heard a teenager talk about wanting to be a nurse because no one in her family had ever been to a doctor without fear. When he left, he didn't say much. But the next foundation meeting, he pushed for more flexible funding, less paperwork, more trust. Change, she was learning, didn't always come with speeches. Sometimes it came in silence after someone finally saw. Meanwhile, he watched from the edges. He attended meetings but rarely spoke unless asked. He signed checks, cleared bureaucratic hurdles, shielded her from corporate politics but never stepped in front of her. He let her lead. One afternoon, she found him in the break room staring at a spreadsheet. "You okay?" she asked. He rubbed his temples. Board's pushing for faster ROI on the foundation. They want numbers, graduation rates, employment stats, all that. And I told them real change doesn't fit in a quarterly report. She poured herself a cup of tea. "They'll come around. Or they won't, but we keep going either way." He looked at her. "How do you stay so steady?" "Because I remember who we're doing this for," she said. "Not the board. Not the donors. The kid who stayed up all night studying because he wants to be the first in his family to go to college. That's the only metric that matters." He smiled faintly. "You're going to change everything." "I'm not trying to change everything," she said. "Just one life at a time." As the months passed, the program grew, not in flashy headlines but in quiet ripples. A local college partnered with them to offer scholarships. A grocery chain started donating fresh produce for family meals. A retired engineer began teaching robotics on weekends. And through it all, she stayed grounded. She still took the bus sometimes, not because she had to, but because it reminded her of where she'd come from. She still visited her mother every Sunday, bringing soup and stories. She still wrote notes, though now they were tucked into staff lockers or left on volunteers' desks. "You mattered today. Your patience made a difference." He noticed and started doing the same. Small things. A handwritten thank you to the janitor who kept the office clean. A coffee for the security guard who always asked about his day. He was learning that kindness wasn't weakness. It was the strongest kind of strength. Then came the night everything almost unraveled. It was late. Rain poured outside, drumming against the windows. She was the last one in the office, finalizing a grant application. He'd stayed too, working remotely from the corner couch. Out of nowhere, she slammed her laptop shut. "I can't do this," she said, voice raw. He sat up. "What's wrong?" "All of it," she said, running a hand through her hair. The meetings, the reports, the endless explaining why helping people isn't a cost center. "I miss the kids. I miss just being there, not managing a system built to measure hearts like their products." He didn't offer solutions, just listened. "I feel like I'm losing myself," she whispered. "Like I traded cleaning floors for cleaning up other people's messes in a fancier suit." He stood and walked over. "Not too close, just near enough, then we change it," he said. "How?" "We strip it back. Keep the core. Let go of the rest. If the system doesn't serve the people, it's not worth keeping." She looked at him, eyes tired but searching. "You'd really do that? After all the work we've put in?" "Work without soul is just noise," he said. "And I'd rather have quiet truth than loud emptiness." She nodded slowly. "Okay, let's rebuild." They stayed up until 2 a.m., tearing apart the old structure and sketching something new on a whiteboard. Simpler, more human, centered on relationships, not reports. When they finally left, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the streetlights. He walked her to the bus stop, even though his driver was waiting. "You know," she said as they stood under the awning, "I used to think you were the coldest person I'd ever met." He chuckled. "And now? Now I think you're just someone who forgot how to be warm and finally remembered." He didn't reply. Just stood there, watching the city breathe in the quiet after the storm. A few days later, she called a team meeting. Announced the changes. Some people were nervous. Others relieved. One young staffer cried, "It finally feels like us again." And that's when he knew they were on the right path. Not because of budgets or approvals, but because people felt seen. One Saturday morning, he showed up at the center unannounced. Not in a suit, in jeans and an old hoodie. He brought donuts and coffee. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Just a guy who wants to help set up chairs for the art class." She smiled. "All right. But you're on trash duty after," he laughed. "Fair." They worked side by side, unrolling mats, arranging paint jars, taping paper to tables. No titles, no roles. Just two people preparing a space where kids could feel safe, creative, Loved. When the first child arrived, a shy girl with braids and paint-splattered sneakers, she ran straight to Lena and hugged her legs. "Miss Lena, I drew you something." She held up a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures under a rainbow. One tall, one short, one in the middle. "That's me, you, and Mr. Thorne," the girl said proudly. He froze. Lena looked at him, eyes soft. "She calls you that now. Says you're the quiet one who listens." He knelt down. "Thank you," he told the girl. "It's the best picture I've ever seen." And it was, because in that simple drawing, he saw what they'd built, not a program, not a project, but a kind of family. Later, as the kids painted and laughed and spilled glitter everywhere, he stood by the window watching. Lena joined him, holding 2 paper cups of juice. "We did good," she said quietly. "We're still doing it," he corrected. She nodded. "Yeah, we are." And in that moment, surrounded by the joyful chaos of children creating something beautiful out of nothing, he realized something profound. He hadn't saved her. She hadn't saved him. They'd saved each other. By choosing to see, to trust, to show up as they really were, no masks, no roles. Just humans trying to make the world a little kinder, one small act at a time. And that, he thought as a little boy proudly showed him a lopsided clay bowl, was more than enough. 1 year after the first note was left on the coffee table, the community center held its grand reopening, not because it was new, but because it was finally whole. The old building had been patched and painted, yes, but more than that, it had been filled with something that couldn't be measured in square footage or funding: belonging. The day dawned bright and warm, the kind of California morning that smells like jasmine and possibility. Volunteers arrived early, hanging handmade banners, setting up folding chairs, arranging tables with cookies and lemonade. Kids buzzed around in mismatched socks and proud smiles, clutching drawings they'd made for the occasion. A local band tuned their instruments under the shade of an old oak tree. Everything felt alive, not polished, not perfect, but real. He stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. He wasn't in a suit, just a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands tucked in his pockets. No entourage, no security, just him, standing quietly, like any other guest. He spotted her across the courtyard, kneeling beside a teenager who looked nervous, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. She spoke softly, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The boy nodded, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage where he'd soon share his story. How he'd gone from skipping school to leading a peer mentorship group. He didn't interrupt. Didn't approach. Just watched, the way he had that first night on the sofa. Only this time there was no suspicion, no testing. Just quiet admiration. She looked up then as if she could feel his gaze. Their eyes met across the crowd. She gave a small nod. He returned it. No words needed. Later, during the opening ceremony, she stood at the mic, not with a script, but with her hands clasped and her voice steady. "This place isn't about programs or funding," she said. "It's about people. About showing up for each other when no one else does. About believing in someone before they believe in themselves." She didn't mention him, didn't thank him by name, and he was grateful for that. This wasn't his story. It never had been. After her speech, the crowd clapped, not politely but with real joy. Parents hugged their kids. Teachers wiped their eyes. A little girl ran up to hand her a daisy, which she tucked behind her ear and wore for the rest of the day. He wandered through the booths, art displays, science projects, a poetry corner where kids read their own verses. At one table, a boy showed him a robot made from cardboard and bottle caps. "It's a homework helper," the boy explained proudly. "Press the red button and it says, 'You got this.'" He pressed it. A tinny voice chirped, "You got this." He smiled. Best invention I've ever seen. As the afternoon wore on, he found himself drawn to the quiet corners, the reading nook filled with donated books, the garden where kids grew vegetables they'd later cook in nutrition class, the wall covered in handprints of every child who'd passed through the doors. He stopped in front of it. Hundreds of tiny prints in every color, blue, green, gold, purple, each one labeled with a name and a year. He ran his fingers over one near the bottom, faded but still clear. Miguel, 2023. He remembered that kid, quiet, always sitting alone at lunch, eyes down. Now he was tutoring others in math. A voice came from behind him. "We call it the wall of belonging," he turned. She stood there, holding 2 cups of lemonade. "Because once you leave your mark here," she said, "you're always part of this place, no matter where life takes you." He took the cup she offered. "It's beautiful. It's necessary," she corrected gently. "Kids need to know they matter. Not someday. Not if they succeed. Right now. As they are," he nodded. "I'm learning that." "You're doing more than learning," she said. "You're living it." He looked around, at the laughter, the music, the messy, joyful chaos of people connecting. "I used to think success meant building something that lasted forever. A legacy in stone and steel. And now I think a real legacy is the quiet moments no one sees. The note left on a table, the hand on a shoulder. The belief you give someone when they've run out of their own." She smiled. "That's the kind of legacy that actually changes the world." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching a group of kids chase bubbles across the yard. Then she said, "My mom wants to meet you." He blinked. "Today?" "She's inside. Said she's waited long enough." His stomach tightened. He'd met powerful people, presidents, CEOs, celebrities, but none of them scared him like this. "Okay," he said. She led him through the back door into a small room that had once been a storage closet, but was now a cozy sitting area with soft chairs and sunlight streaming through the window. An older woman sat there, wrapped in a light shawl, her hair silver, her eyes sharp but kind. "This is him," Lena said softly. The woman looked up, really looked. Not at his clothes, not at his reputation, but at his face, his eyes, his posture, the way he held himself. "So," she said in a voice that carried both warmth and warning, "you're the one who finally saw my daughter." He didn't know what to say, so he told the truth. "I didn't see her at first, but she helped me learn how." The woman studied him a moment longer, then she patted the chair beside her. "Sit." He did. She didn't ask about his money or his company. She asked about his parents, his childhood, his regrets. And when he answered, haltingly, honestly, she listened like every word mattered. After a while, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. She unfolded it carefully to reveal a simple wooden carving, a bird in flight. "My father made this," she said. "He was a carpenter, poor but proud. He used to say, even the highest bird started on the ground. He gave it to me when I left home. Now I give it to you." He stared at it. "I can't." "You can," she said firmly, "because you've learned to fly without forgetting the ground." He took it. The wood was smooth, worn by time and touch. It felt heavy with meaning. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded. "Take care of my girl. Not as a boss. Not as a savior. As a friend, I will," he said, and he meant it with everything in him. Later, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the yard, he found a quiet bench near the garden. He sat, the wooden bird in his palm, watching the day wind down. Kids were packing up their projects. Parents called out goodbyes. Volunteers stacked chairs. The band played one last song, soft, slow, full of hope. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, tense, alone, convinced that control was the same as strength. He thought about the night he pretended to sleep, expecting betrayal, and instead found grace. He hadn't just hired a maid. He'd met a teacher, a healer, a mirror, and in her reflection he'd finally seen himself, not as a title or a bank balance, but as a person worthy of kindness, even when he didn't deserve it. Now he tried to pay that forward. Not with grand gestures, but with daily choices. Listening more than speaking, giving without expecting return, showing up even when it was hard. He looked up and saw her again, this time comforting a young girl who'd scraped her knee. She knelt, brushed the dirt off, whispered something that made the girl giggle through her tears. He didn't go to her, didn't need to, he just watched, heartful, as she did what she did best, tend to the world with quiet, unwavering care. And in that moment, he understood the real ending wasn't about romance or riches or even redemption. It was about connection, about two people, once strangers, once employer and employee, choosing every day to see each other clearly. No masks, no roles, just humans, doing their best. As twilight settled over the courtyard, the last of the guests drifted away. The lights came on inside the center, warm, yellow, inviting. Through the windows, he could see her turning off equipment, straightening chairs, humming softly to herself. He stood, slipped the wooden bird into his pocket, and walked toward the parking lot. But before he left, he paused at the wall of belonging. He didn't add his handprint. That wasn't his place. Instead, he took a small piece of chalk from a nearby bin and wrote, in neat letters beneath the last row, "Someone sees you." Then he turned and walked away, not looking back because he didn't need to. He knew the words would stay, and so would the change they'd built. Together, quietly, one act of kindness at a time.